Do humans have ranks? Robert Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. I personally was always picked last for the wiffle ball team as a kid, being short, uncoordinated, and typically preoccupied with some book that I was lugging around. Thus, having been perpetually ensconced at the bottom of that pecking order, I'm skeptical about the notion of ranking systems for humans. Part of the problem is definitional, in that some supposed studies of human dominance are actually examining type A features. People defined as dominant are ones who, in interviews, have hostile, competitive contents to their answers, or who speak quickly and interrupt the interviewer. This is not dominance in a way that any zoologist would endorse. Other studies have examined the psychological and physiological correlates of individual differences in humans who are competing directly against one another in a way that looks like dominance. Some have examined, for example, the hormonal responses in college wrestlers depending on whether they won or lost their match. Others have examined the endocrine correlates of rank competition in the military. One of the most fruitful areas has been to examine ranks in the corporate world. Chapter 13 of this book showed how the executive stress syndrome is mostly a myth. People at the top give ulcers rather than get them. Most studies have shown that it is middle management that succumbs to the stress-related diseases. This is thought to reflect the killer combination that these folks are often burdened with, namely high work demands but little autonomy, responsibility without control. Collectively, these studies have produced some experimentally reliable correlations. I'm just a bit dubious as to what they mean. For starters, I'm not sure what a couple of minutes of competitive wrestling between two highly conditioned 20-year-olds teaches us about which 60-year-old gets clogged arteries. At the other end, I wonder what the larger meaning is of rankings among business executives. While primate hierarchies can ultimately indicate how hard you have to work for your calories, corporate hierarchies are ultimately about how hard you have to work for, say, a plasma TV. Another reason for my skepticism is that for 99% of human history, societies were most probably strikingly unhierarchical. This is based on the fact that contemporary hunter-gatherer bands are remarkably egalitarian, which means equal. But my skepticism is most strongly anchored in two reasons having to do with the complexity of the human psyche. First, humans can belong to a number of different ranking systems simultaneously, and ideally are excelling in at least one of them, and thus may be giving the greatest psychological weight to that one. So, the lowly subordinate in the mailroom of the big corporation may, after hours, be deriving tremendous prestige and self-esteem from being the deacon of his church, or the captain of her weekend softball team, or maybe at the top of the class at the adult extension school. One person's highly empowering dominance hierarchy may be a mere 9-to-5 irrelevancy to the person in the next cubicle, and this will greatly skew results. And most important, people put all sorts of spin inside their heads about ranks. Consider a marathon being observed by a Martian scientist studying physiology and rank in humans. The obvious thing to do is to keep track of the order in which people finish the race. Runner 1 dominates 5, who clearly dominates 5,000. But what if runner 5,000 is a couch potato who took up running just a few months ago, who half expected to keel over from a coronary by mile 13 and instead finished, sure, hours after the crowds wandered off, but finished, exhausted and glowing? And what if runner 5 had spent the previous week reading in the sports section that someone of their world-class quality should certainly finish in the top 3, maybe even blow away the field? No Martian on Earth could predict correctly who is going to feel exultantly dominant afterwards. People are as likely to race against themselves, their own previous best time, as against some external yardstick. This can be seen in the corporate world as well. An artificial example. The kid in the mailroom is doing a fabulous job and is rewarded, implausibly, with a $50,000 a year salary. A senior vice president screws up big time and is punished, even more implausibly, with a $50,001 a year salary. By the perspective of that Martian, or even by a hierarchically minded wildebeest, it is obvious that the vice president is in better shape to acquire the nuts and berries needed for survival. But you can guess who is going to work contentedly and who is going to be making angry phone calls to a headhunter from the cell phone in the BMW. Humans can play internal, rationalizing games with rank based on their knowledge of what determined their placement. Consider the following fascinating example. Guys who win at some sort of competitive interaction typically show at least a small rise in their circulating testosterone levels, unless they consider the win to have come from sheer luck. When you put all those qualifiers together, I think the net result is some pretty shaky ground when it comes to considering human rank and its relevance to the stress response, except in one realm. If you want to figure out the human equivalent of being a low-ranking social animal, an equivalent that carries with it atypically high rates of physical and psychological stressors, which is ecologically meaningful in that it's not just about how many hours you have to work to buy an iPod, which is likely to overwhelm most of the rationalizations and alternative hierarchies that one can muster. Check out A Poor Human. Robert Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. If you like this and if you want more, do give some love to this channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.